Our party, I work with the assumption that the party will grow and build and be a dominant party. If that does not come about, and I cannot predict the future, but we do restore liberty to this country, I won't lose any sleep over it.
Thousand Oaks, California. Good evening.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I had a little complaint first before I get into my question here. I think C-SPAN's taking too many calls from the East, you know. I don't consider Florida and Maryland and all those other states, you know, as part of the West, and I think the West, we're getting sort of cheated here and getting into your show. And another complaint I had, several times I've called into C-SPAN here, and for some reason somebody's clicked me off the line, and I lost my turn, and I had to go through the whole thing again, couldn't even get through on the line there, and I don't know what the problem is with that, but it's about 3 times now that's happened to me.
Yeah, I don't know what that problem is either, but we'll certainly look into that. As far as the East Coast, West Coast thing goes, we alternate.
Yeah, but you haven't been. You've had about three calls from the East, I think Florida, Maryland, and some other state, and then you hit somebody from Seattle or something like that, you know.
Well, if that's happening, I apologize. I haven't been taking that close attention, but we'll keep a watch on that. Go ahead with your question.
What I wanted to comment on was, like, he always, third-party candidates, I've voted third-party candidates several times, and they always say, well, you know, we get great coverage locally here, but they never get any coverage nationwide, you know, and it's just like, not necessarily so much the Libertarian Party this time because they didn't make all 50 ballots, but that black lady, Leilani, she made the ballot in all 50 states, and they, you know, she's getting the total news blackout on the national network, and you can't run a national campaign for president and not get coverage nationwide, otherwise you're not going to get any part of the vote, you know, and that's just like the Greenpeace Party there in Germany, you know, that's a third party that came on, but it's basically a leftist, socialist type party there, and the news media just ate them all up, you know, give them all kinds of coverage there, and then they've won some elections there in Germany. If they did this, give the same kind of fair coverage to all the third parties in the United States, whether it's conservative or liberal, they would probably be some conservative third party congressmen and some liberals and the minor party candidates, you know. And the question I had for Ron Paul was, the only thing I don't like about the Libertarian Party is that I've been to several of your meetings and I've raised this point, is the fact that, you know, you seem to be for open immigration and stuff, and I live in California and I see what, and I mean, you know, I'm not just picking on the Mexicans out here. I mean, we got people from India and every place else in the third world coming across here, and down the border of San Diego, they've been catching more people from Eastern Europe coming across the border down there than they have Mexicans lately, you know, and I think that's going to destroy the country. And the second point I don't like about the Libertarian Party is I think you guys are sort of naive on your world policies. If you take all our forward bases away and bring all our military stuff back to the United States there, you know, you're going to let communism, you know, run loose in the world there, and we're not going to support any of the, you know, freedom movements in the third world countries. You know, I'd like to kind of, you know what your...
Okay.
Right?
Thanks.
Well, I think that there's a lot of deception going on about foreign policy. You know, we have to stop the evil empire. But at the same time, we're supposed to spend $300 billion a year policing the world and stopping the spread of communism. We have a president that signs a treaty that invites the Soviet Union to come over here and inspect our bases. But not only that, the most important thing about that treaty is it's opened up the door for us to bail out a failed system. Communism isn't working. They're turning toward capitalism. They can't feed themselves. They didn't win in Afghanistan, and Europe's about in revolt against the Soviet Union, and we're sending them money to bail them out. So you're not fighting communism. You're fighting the military-industrial complex. You're fighting subsidies to the communists. At the same time, they tell you got to go to Nicaragua and fight against the spread of communism. We have honored a commitment. All the presidents have honored a commitment made by Kennedy for us never to touch Castro. 90 miles off shore, much closer than Ortega and much tougher. But if you organize in Florida for the overthrow of Castro, you're arrested. So there's a lot of fallacies going on and a lot of deceit, and we just don't think that you're getting the straight story. Now, as far as immigration goes, there's a lot of immigration problems, but it's because this economy's a mess and people get fearful and frightened for unnecessary reasons. But one of the things you have to realize, as soon as you make something illegal, you raise the cost and increase the value of it. So if a Mexican citizen comes up here because he wants to help us, that is, pick the crops and do the things that literally raises our standard of living, where a lot of Americans won't do these jobs, does he go back home and help his family? No, he's scared because we have guns at the border. So he becomes an illegal alien. So literally the law backfires, and we have more illegal aliens. Rather than having workers coming up and freely going back and forth, most people are much more concerned about the movement of people back and forth on Mexico border than a Canadian border. We have tens of thousands of people going back and forth. In a free market economy, a healthy economy, we have a shortage of labor. People who come over and want to work, they help us. They enhance our standard of living. They take the funds back. It's a perfect foreign aid system. Certainly, it's horrible what we do today. We put guns on the border. We won't let them come in to pick the crops. Our prices go up. They don't help the families. Then they tax you, and they take your money, and they send it to the Mexican government, and it never helps the poor people in Mexico.
Columbia, Missouri, good evening.
Good evening. Mr. Paul, I wanted to ask basically two questions, but they both relate to drugs. One is, do you differentiate between drugs in the term do you see a difference between alcohol and marijuana and heroin? And the other is, do you favor action when and if you become influential in the presidential realm, decriminalization or government-regulated legalization?
Thank you.
We don't see any difference between the drugs, and we would decriminalize. The only difference that you could figure out between say the marijuana and some of the other drugs and alcohol and cigarettes is that alcohol and cigarettes are a lot more dangerous because they kill a lot more people. We're losing 450,000 people a year with alcohol and cigarettes, and you and I are being taxed to subsidize the tobacco industry. At the same time, then we spend money telling people not to smoke because they cause cancer. Most of our state governments are in the business of selling drugs, that is alcohol, that kill a lot of people. So we think the drug laws are really foolish. They backfire. They create the drug dealer. They create 50% of the crime. They encourage kids to be involved because they make such big bucks dealing in the drug trade. So we think it's a horrible system, but what we want to legalize is freedom of choice. We think that people ought to have a choice in the matter and make decisions for themselves. We can't protect individuals from themselves, but the laws would, even in a libertarian society, prevent these prohibited the use of drugs by kids and children, because children aren't consenting adults. But the drug laws are devastating, and they've done more harm. They weren't written by the founders of the country. They were only written again same time we had the income tax, same time we had the Federal Reserve System, same time we changed our foreign policy, same time we lost our way in definition of what individual liberty was. In 1914 is when we started telling people they shouldn't smoke and drink. Prohibition of alcohol was a total failure. So we would decriminalize and we would treat the drugs in a similar manner, although we do recognize that the government regulated and subsidized drugs are a lot more dangerous.
St. Louis, Missouri, good evening.
Yes, Dr. Paul. I think one thing most people today agree is that it takes less personal freedom, personal responsibility, to live life. Due to the advent of the regulatory agencies like the FDA, which tells us which is good and bad, and motor vehicle safety, which features on an automobile are good and bad, there are fewer options, and it's responsibility on our part. In the past, culture as a whole has acted as a bank of knowledge, gaining the experience of individuals and families and dispensing it back to us with common sense. And I think a lot of people would like to have something more like that today, but they fear that the world is more complex, more technological. There's too much information out there for that to be adequate. What would the Libertarian Party or government do to perform some of these assistances to society?
All right, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Well, that's a very good point. I think it's true. I think the world is more complex and more technological. Therefore, we need less big government, because big government is a blunderer. I mean, to talk about safety devices from the national level but through a bureaucracy doesn't make any sense. So this is the strongest argument I know for having much more local individual control of our lives and making our decisions rather than the federal government. But these agencies backfire. Whether you have an EPA, it turns out to be a welfare system for sewer developers, and it doesn't really protect the environment. Whether you have if you have the FDA, what does it do? It turns our people suffering from AIDS and cancer into smugglers because they can't get the drugs they want, and they go to Mexico, the free country of Mexico, to get drugs. I mean, that's how foolish these things are. They backfire. So it should be regulated through the marketplace, through local, through the rules against fraud, but not through a federal monster.
Dr. Paul, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for joining us. Ron Paul, running for president as the Libertarian Party's candidate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your calls, and have a good evening.